Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Joseph Holtz. I'm a member of the board of the Sarasota Music Archives. And frequently, Joy just starts out these lectures by herself. And it means that you don't necessarily know some things about her. And we thought we might share a few little tidbits about her so you know who's speaking today. You probably gleaned from a lot of her commentary that she is quite the expert on opera. And her background is that she graduated from the Oberlin Conservatory in Ohio, went off to the New England Conservatory in Boston to get her master's, got a nice scholarship and went over to Europe and never came back. Basically, well, that's a long word. Actually, she did because she's here now. But she ended up singing in a lot of the houses in Germany, primarily in Munich and in Frankfurt. Is that correct?
Yeah, Dortmund, Frankfurt, Cologne, Düsseldorf.
Yeah, you were on the tour of the opera houses in Germany, basically, and graduated from being a mezzo-soprano to a full-blown soprano, and sang all these fabulous roles, particularly some of the roles in Wagner operas. So she really is a unique expert, and then she came back to the United States and taught at Boston University for a couple of decades, right?
Well, 15 years.
15 years, so a decade and a half, I was close. I also want to point out she did have, print up this, and I hope you picked up this sheet, because she's going to refer to this sheet frequently. And if you look on the back, you'll see that the Giving Challenge is coming up on April 9th and 10th. A lot of you probably know about it already, but the Music Archives does participate in this, and it's a great way to double a contribution to any one of over 750 worthwhile charities here in the Southwest Florida region. So, as a friend of ours used to say, you want to give until it feels good. And so that means we hope that we can count on your support for future programs here at the Archives. You can also join the Archives. It's a great way to know about all these programs in advance. Today is our last program of the season, and we look forward to being back. Actually, they do some programs over the summer that are more popular jazz-oriented, and we'll be back in the fall, and then, of course, in January with this series. So please, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Joy McIntyre.
Well, it's great to see you all. A lot of old friends and maybe some new ones. Great. I'm lucky to be here today and have the assistance of my good friend Diego. Sorry?
Forget the Calabria.
That's the one I got away.
They use Calabria because it's different from my email, so that works.
Calabria is good. Yeah, it's in Italy. So, thank you, David, for everything you do. Okay, today, we're going to go back over a century. Okay? Let's imagine Vienna at the turn of the 19th to the 20th centuries. Think about the atmosphere. Did the carefree waltzes of Johann Strauss still fill the air in 1900? Here's how the author Joachim Fest describes it. Vienna at the turn of the century was the metropolis of a European empire, the scintillating imperial city, embodying the glory and heritage of the centuries. Brilliant, self-assured, prosperous. It governed an empire that extended into what is now Russia, and deep into the Balkans, also over to Spain. 50 million people, members of 10 different nations and races, were ruled from Vienna and held together as a unit. There were Germans, Magyars, Poles, Jews, Slovenes, Croats, Serbs, Italians, Czechs, Slovaks, Romanians, and Ruthenians. That's someplace east of Hungary. right? Such was the genius of this city that it was able to modulate all the discords of the far-flung empire to balance its tensions and make them fruitful. But of course, like all good things, it didn't last. And maybe it wasn't always good. In fact, by 1900, after over 600 years of ruling vast areas of Europe, the pulse of the Habsburg Empire was getting weaker. The aging emperor, Franz Joseph, had already been in power for over 50 years. In the coffee houses of Vienna, all was not just cafe and Sachertorte and good cheer. Lively debate accommodated a variety of contrasting viewpoints in the arts, literature, religion, and politics. The dual monarchy with Hungary had been established in 1867. And that is kind of an anomaly, a dual monarchy. And it lasted 1867, so it lasted pretty long, till the First World War. It diluted the concept of absolute monarchy. And now, in 1900, nationalism was on the rise. As the Habsburg Empire began to crumble, paradoxically, a surge of creative, cultural, and artistic energy bubbled up in Vienna. Those ubiquitous coffee houses and the living room salons were peopled by the likes of Sigmund Freud, Gustav Klimt, Stefan Zweig, Hugo Wolf, Alexander Zemlinsky, Hans Pfitzner, Hugo von Hofmannsthal, Else Jerusalem, Adolf Loos, Theodor Herzl, Egon Schiele, as well as the families of the philosopher Ludwig von Wittgenstein and Adele Bloch-Bauer, and countless others, all in Vienna at the same time. Later, about 1913, it is said that Stalin, Tito, Trotsky, Freud, and Adolf Hitler all lived within about 3 miles of each other in Vienna. Yeah. At the turn of the century in music, Johannes Brahms had just died, but fortunately, Gustav Mahler stood ready to take up the cause. With, of course, Alban Berg and Arnold Schoenberg waiting in the wings to upend traditional harmonic analysis. In art, the new style, Art Nouveau, called Jugendstil in German, was gaining strength through the founding of a group of artists called the Secession. Also gaining strength was a local Viennese politician with an acute legal mind, that's a quotation, by the name of Karl Lueger. Anybody know Karl Lueger?
Tell us.
He brought sorely needed social projects to the city, and that was good. But his successful urban reforms were combined with virulent anti-Semitism. Into this atmosphere in 1906 came youthful Adolf Hitler, hoping to breathe Vienna's air and access its cultural energy. At the time, Karl Lueger had already been mayor for 10 years. Hitler cannot have failed to notice the dark undertones, like the menacing rumbling of drums under a beautiful Viennese waltz, which were undermining the giddy social life of the Viennese. And this was the city where Hitler intended to attend the Art Academy and study for a career as a painter or a visual artist. He sometimes thought about being an architect. Yeah, it didn't work out, actually. Yeah, so we know, he famously failed. In this vortex called Vienna, a lovely young woman, Alma Schindler, daughter of a prominent landscape artist, was growing up. She was an accomplished pianist, and absent the trappings of a formal education, not uncommon for young women of her age, she was solely devoted to music. We know her now as Alma Mahler-Gropius-Werfel. Currently, there are at least 2 films and a dozen different books about her available on Amazon. Menotti wrote an author about that. So here we were, Amazon. And even more if you count the translations into other languages. So dozens of kinds of source material on Alma Mahler-Gropius-Werfel. Not to forget, of course, one very memorable song by Tom Lehrer. As you listen to this irreverent, rather rude, but clever song, you will hear the names of Alma's 3 famous husbands, Gustav Mahler, Walter Gropius, and Franz Werfel, as well as the name of one of her lovers, Oskar Kokoschka. Yes, it was an expressionist painter. And also there will be a reference to Bernadette, which I will explain later. Diego, if you please.
The loveliest girl in Vienna was Alma, the smartest as well. Once you picked her up on your antenna, you'd never be free of her spell. Her lovers were many and varied. From the day she began her digging, there were 3 famous ones whom she married, and God knows how many between. Alma, jealous. All modern women are jealous. Which of your magical wands got you Gustav and Walter and Franz? The first one she married was Mahler, whose buddies all knew him as Gustav, and each time he saw her he'd holler, "Ach, that is the Fräulein I must have." Their marriage, however, was murder. He'd scream to the heavens above, "I'm writing das Lied von der Erde, and she only wants to make love." Alma, jealous. All modern women are jealous. You should have a statue in bronze for bagging Gustav and Walter and Franz. While married to Gus, she met Gropius, and soon she was swinging with Walter. Gus died and her teardrops were copious. She cried all the way to the altar, but he would work late at the Bauhaus and only came home now and then. She said, "What am I running? A chow house? It's time to change partners again." Alma, jealous. All modern women are jealous. Though you didn't even use puns, you got Gustav and Walter and Franz. While married to Walt, she'd met Werfel, and he too was caught in her net. He married her, but he was careful, 'cause Alma was no Bernadette. And that is the story of Alma, who knew how to receive and to give. The body that reached her embalmer was one that had known how to live. Alma, jealous. How can they help being jealous? Ducks always envy the swans who get Gustav and Walter. You never did falter with Gustav and Walter and Franz.
The subtitles are auto generated. It's YouTube auto generation. It's bad with names.
Do you ever go to SIL on, I think it's on Wednesdays or something, and they do subtitles, and it comes across in, this is SIL, you all know what SIL is, right? Yeah. And we have a program in SIL called SIL Select that sends DVDs to retirement homes. But Harvard gets one. And I sit there and I watch this, and the captions are just so funny because they don't, this is AI doing this. AI at work.
Trying to hear it.
I noticed it said ball house. What she said is bow house. You guys know all this. What an education.
Instead of fronts.
Yeah. Never mind. Anyway, moving right along. Alma Mahler engendered immense interest in her day, and it appears also in our day, and so of biographies. I read her autobiography many, many decades ago. It's called Mein Leben. I still own it. And recently there are 2 new books about her in English, the titles of which serve to describe this lecture. One title is Malevolent Muse. The other is Passionate Spirit. I will leave it for you to decide at the end of this lecture. So the salient question is, was she a voracious collector of famous men, or, as she herself said, simply in love with genius? So we're now going to have an excerpt from a documentary that was made about her. It has a couple of titles. One of them is History's Original Femme Fatale, also called Big Alma. Anyway, it's quite long, but we're not going to show the whole thing. So, Diego, if you will, and we will stop when it says gegenseitig und gleich.
Subtitles again.
Oh. Yeah, well, no, the subtitles are for them. Yeah, so use the subtitles because they're not the AI, they're from the original documentary.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
We can attempt to auto-translate, because apparently the subtitles are in German.
No, but, well, a lot of them speak English in this documentary, so
maybe
we'll play it by ear. How about that?
the settings might come back up in a second, but just ignore it.
Aus New York kommend traf auf dem Flugfeld Tulln bei Wien die Witwe des 1945 verstorbenen Dichters Franz Werfel ein. Vor ihrer Ehe mit Franz Werfel war sie mit dem Komponisten Gustav Mahler verheiratet. Frau Alma Werfel ist eine Tochter des Landschaftsmalers Jakob Emil Schindler. Sie hat während ihres Aufenthalts in den USA die amerikanische Staatsbürgerschaft erworben. Zu ihrem Empfang waren Vertreter des Unterrichtsministeriums in der Stadt Wien erschienen.
Um die Jahrhundertwende oder vielleicht bis 1910 war sie die most glamorous woman there was.
Alma was very imposing. She was plump, she had a magnificent bosom, and she had a bit of false hair on the top of her head, but it was well dissimulated.
Die Geheimwaffe der Alma Mahler waren ihre Tränen. Sie hat so große Tränen gehabt, dass sie 0,nichts oder sonst war.
She had a great sense of replying to you and of looking fascinating. Everybody's written that about Alma, that was true. When you were with her, alone especially, she looked at you intently and it looked as if she was thrilled by what you were saying, which I'm sure was not always true, because one doesn't say only immortal things.
Sie waren in einem Sarg, der 340 Kilo also der war geschweißt, ja? Und da drinnen war allerhand möglich, jetzt einen ägyptischen Grobreiber gegeben. Der hätte dort alles Mögliche herausgeholt. Da hat sie zum Beispiel die Tristan-Noten gehabt, damit sie am jüngsten Tag, wenn sie aufsteht, sofort den Tristan spielen kann.
Als Alma Schindler hat das Licht der Welt erblickt, und zwar im Jahre 1879, also immer noch zweite Hälfte des 19. Jahrhunderts. Eine aufregende Persönlichkeit mit einer absolut faszinierenden Aura, vielen Männern. Ihrem männlichen Publikum hat sie den Kopf verdreht.
Alma ist ein Sonntagskind und die Erstgeborene. Ihre Schwester Grete kommt ein Jahr später zur Welt. Almas Mutter Anna, eine Hamburger Operettensoubrette, gibt ihre Karriere zugunsten ihres Mannes auf. Der Landschaftsmaler Schindler ist zwar hochbegabt, aber noch unbekannt. Und er kann mit Geld nicht umgehen. Die Schindlers leben die ersten Ehejahre also sehr bescheiden. In einer Wohngemeinschaft mit dem Maler Viktor Berger. Die kleine Alma erfährt erst Jahre später, dass Gretel ihre Halbschwester ist. Das Ergebnis einer Affäre ihrer Mutter mit dem Mitbewohner Viktor Berger. Das malerische Talent Schindlers jedenfalls trägt ebenfalls Früchte. Seine Bilder finden Käufer, er kann sich ein eigenes Atelier leisten und hat viele Schüler. Und er kann sich eine Sommerresidenz mieten. Das Barockschloss Blankenberg unweit von Wien. Ein Paradies für die Mädchen und ein Paradies für den Landschaftsmaler, den Alma oft begleitet, wenn er mit der Staffelei unterwegs ist. Karl Moll, Schindlers Lieblingsschüler, wird Assistent des Meisters. Er lebt bei der Familie, sehr zur Freude von Anna Schindler. In diesen Jahren bekommt Emil Jakob Schindler von Kronprinz Rudolf den Auftrag, Bilder von den südlichen Regionen der Donaumonarchie anzufertigen. Die Familie bereist Istrien, Dalmatien und Griechenland. Schindler gilt nun als einer der bedeutendsten Maler der Monarchie. Sogar Kaiser Franz Josef besucht Schindlers große Ausstellung im Wiener Künstlerhaus und erwirbt eines seiner Bilder.
Was am weitesten, glaube ich, von heute weg ist, dass sie nicht in die Schule gegangen ist. Also sie wird zu Hause ausgebildet, sie hat Französischunterricht mit einem Privatlehrer, aber ansonsten lernt sie einfach durch Teilhabe. Also das ist eine ganz andere Bildungsvorstellung, als wir sie haben. Da merkt man, es ist wirklich weit weg von jetzt. Dann hat sie neben dem Französischunterricht auch natürlich Klavierunterricht, das ist klar, da muss man sich bilden lassen.
1892 erkrankt Almas Vater während einer Reise. Wenige Tage später stirbt Schindler aufgrund einer Fehldiagnose der Ärzte an einer Blinddarmentzündung. Im Alter von 50 Jahren. Alma ist zu diesem Zeitpunkt 13 Jahre alt. 3 Jahre später heiratet Anna Schindler den Schüler ihres verstorbenen Gatten Karl Moll, mit dem sie seit Jahren eine heimliche Affäre hatte.
Den hat sie nie richtig...
It's on YouTube. You can watch it all time. Yeah, you go to YouTube. And what's amusing for me and other German speakers perhaps is the Viennese accent. Two of those people have very strong Viennese accent. One guy says, the thing that was so exciting or unusual about her was her big tears. In Nur komme nichts war alles nass. In a blink of an eye, everything was wet when she started crying. Interesting. And then the guy was talking about her coffin and how heavy it was. That's funny. Because of the Viennese accent. Right. Okay. So she had, I mean, they talk a little bit about her mother. Actually, she and her mother couldn't stand each other. And so it was a, sort of war at home. When the novelist Thomas Mann was asked how he could tolerate Alma, who by the 1940s, they were all in Hollywood together, expatriates, represented the kind of German who had become taboo, he thought carefully for a few minutes, and then he said, she gives me partridges to eat, and I like them. The German playwright Albrecht Josef, also one of these Hollywood expats, reported there was an altogether Viennese feminine softness about Alma, even in her most awful moments, that made it difficult to really dislike her. As a girl, Alma was denied higher education, but nevertheless became an avid reader. On solitary walks in the Vienna woods, it is said she memorized all of Goethe's Faust. All 490 pages? Quite a feat. But playing the piano was her sole emotional outlet. She reports that while her sister copied out recipes in the next room, Alma's escape was playing her way through the piano score of Wagner's Tristan and Isolde. That's why she was buried with the score. As an adult, her health was a bit up and down. She didn't metabolize stress very well, to put it politely. She often fainted quite dramatically and repaired to various spas in Europe for rest cures. It was during one of these cures that she met the young, handsome architect Walter Gropius. Later, she claimed countless male admirers. Some may even have become lovers, but I suspect not nearly as many as spiteful tongues have credited her with. One of her most notable lovers, however, because it's documented, was the expressionist painter Oskar Kokoschka, with whom she had a 2-year relationship following the death of Gustav Mahler. Kokoschka painted several striking portraits of her, which you can also find on the internet. She spoke her mind, and her unfiltered opinions on a variety of subjects, from musical performances through to sex, ethnicity, and politics, admitted no guardrails. They were often spiked with casual, derogatory comments about others, however. Her listeners appeared to just wince and bear it. She found funerals upsetting. Oh, so sad. So she did not attend the funerals of her husbands or children. I mean, really. She was clearly controversial, beautiful, intelligent, charming, opinionated, musical, socially well-connected, sharp-tongued, passionate, outspoken, prejudiced, and flirtatious. What could possibly go wrong? For just a bit more context, let's return for a moment to the Habsburg Empire. You've heard that in its heyday, the Habsburg Empire was vast, containing at least 10 nationalities and many more that number of languages. The Edict of Toleration in the late 18th century, actually 1781, and the constitutional provisions of 1867, which established the dual monarchy with Hungary, together with other legislation, sought to ensure equal rights for all ethnicities. So Franz Joseph, he became emperor in 1848, I think. Yeah. So Franz Joseph was kind of forward-thinking, establishing equal rights for all ethnicities. And as the tensions eased in the empire, the distinctions between Jews and their Christian neighbors often became blurred. And beyond that, it was perfectly clear that Jewish talent and so forth were absolutely central to the intellectual and cultural energy of Vienna, the heart of it. But it was a tricky path to tread. Assimilation could be ethnic as well as religious. However, by the time Gustav Mahler, newly baptized into the Christian faith, returned to the Vienna of his youth to take up a new job as director of the Vienna State Opera, this period of tolerance and acceptance was eroding. Biographer Kate Haste tells us that Alma later remarked that Gustav was a believer in Christianity, a Christian Jew, and he paid the penalty. And she says, I was a Christian pagan, and I got off scot-free. Despite her various romantic digressions, if I can call them that, Alma made Gustav Mahler's legacy her life work. So we need to look for a moment at her first husband in more detail, with some examples of his music, and we'll talk a little bit about its importance. Gustav was born in a small town excuse me, in Bohemia, now part of the Czech Republic, halfway between Prague and Brno, to a German-speaking, non-practicing Jewish family. He made his debut as a pianist at the age of 10. After completing his studies as a conductor at the Vienna Conservatory, and for those of you who know Hugo Wolf, one of my favorites, they were roommates in Vienna, Mahler and Wolf. So when he completed his studies, he began what we call the obligatory circuit of German provincial opera houses. That's how conductors learn their craft. Because German opera houses are what they call Dreisparten. So they have three divisions. They'll have plays, and they'll have symphonies, and they'll have opera. And they also have ballet, so you can even divide it further. So for a conductor to go into a circuit of German opera houses, that's how he learns the repertoire and the technique and how to manage orchestras. So he made this obligatory circuit and ended up as principal conductor in Hamburg, a strong position. Gustav Mahler and Alma Schindler met at a social event in Vienna on November the 7th, 1901. 6 weeks later, they were engaged. When they married on March 9th, 1902, Gustav was 19 years her senior with a growing international reputation. Here's the fun part. In his marriage proposal, Gustav carefully explained to Alma that it would simply not do for her to continue composing music. He resented the appearance of competition and felt her musical interests would distract her from meeting his personal needs. He wrote, "You must surrender to me unconditionally and expect only my love in return." And I am quite sure that he loved her passionately. And we're going to now listen to an excerpt. This is actually from another documentary by Michael Tilson Thomas. And we're going to start, I think, with a bit of the Adagietto from the Fifth Symphony. But the Adagietto will come back at the end. Okay? Here you go.
In this new song cycle, The Rückert-Lieder, his music found new tenderness. As if maybe Mahler was sensing that around the corner in his own life some new relationship might be in store. After all, he had the greatest job, the greatest house. Now all he needed was the greatest wife. The winter season of 1901 found Mahler back at his routine at the opera. The job left little time for socializing, but one evening at the home of friends, Mahler thought he met the woman of his dreams. Alma Schindler was a vivacious and accomplished young woman. She was the daughter of the famous landscape painter Emil Schindler and had been brought up in the company of Vienna's foremost artists. She was a skilled musician, an aspiring composer, and presented herself as a kind of aesthetic pin-up girl. She met Mahler at a dinner party in November 1901. He was 41, she was 22. He thought he had found in her the ideal woman to occupy the space he had created in his own heart. After their meeting, he wrote the final Rückert song for her. He soon proposed, making it clear that there was room in their relationship for only one composer, and that would be he. After some hesitation, she agreed, and they were married on March 9th, 1902. That summer, he brought her home to his lakeside villa. He began to work on a new piece, built around the same strands of notes that he'd used in the Rückertlieder. There's a recurring musical motive in these songs, a simple rising scale that Mahler seems to be playing with. Here he is experimenting with it in the introduction to the song, I'm Lost to the World. These notes were central to what's become Mahler's most famous piece, the Adagietto from his Fifth Symphony. The Adagietto is a supreme solo piece, a love song reflecting Mahler's complex relationship with Alma. Its stormy confessions. Delicious and blissful reconciliations.
It'll come back at the end. I mean, it's an incredible piece. Despite Gustav Mahler's many admirable character traits, he was probably not an easy man to live with. Mahler had an almost monomaniacal dedication to making music. As a conductor, he was feared for his meticulous expectations of orchestral musicians. On the other hand, as a composer, he required countless hours of solitude and disciplined concentration. So much so that even on summer vacations, when Gustav was composing his music, conversation during midday meals was absolutely forbidden. One can only imagine the effect this had on the family, particularly the children. Sit through a meal without saying anything. Mahler was always very self-absorbed, not mean-spirited, just self-absorbed. There was so much going on in his mind. And that could easily be mistaken for indifference or arrogance, but I don't think he was that way. He was very generous to his colleagues and other composers, for instance. Although his irascibility was legendary, it is said that his departure from previous conducting positions was always precipitated by disagreements, uncongenial conditions, or falling out with colleagues. On the other hand, he had a very forgiving nature. He respected fellow composer Anton Bruckner, when everybody else was dumping them. And he didn't disparage Johannes Brahms, as others tended to do. And this is what I think is beautiful. On the subject of Richard Wagner's infamous anti-Semitic statements, Mahler simply said, "One really has to forget their existence to give Wagner's genius its due." It's a tough order, but he did it. As Mahler's fame and adoration of the public continued to grow, it led ultimately to prestigious appointments in New York City with the Metropolitan Opera and the New York Philharmonic. He worked obsessively and died of heart failure just short of his 51st birthday. Now that seems to us a young age, but please remember, some of his musical predecessors, Mozart, Mendelssohn, Schubert, all died in their 30s. Mahler's impact, however, was tremendous and far-reaching. Why was he important? He extended the symphonic form. His symphonies were longer and more monumental in structure than Beethoven, Dvorak, and Brahms. Beethoven was for composers of symphonies, and from Brahms too, the great measurement. Beethoven with his 9 symphonies. There's a story about the curse of the 9. I mean, Brahms didn't get quite that far, only wrote 4. But Mahler was sort of haunted by the curse of the 9th. Joe and I were talking about that last time. Mahler modified conventional musical patterns. So archaic forms that were pretty much rigid, like sonata allegro form, key relationships, or fixed order of movements within a symphony. All of that he threw out of the window. Juxtaposition of naive folk elements were contrasted with broader dramatic gestures in his symphonies, within sort of a sea of Sturm und Drang. You know the expression Sturm und Drang? Storm and Drang is really pressure. So you can feel it's tension and release. Tension and release is a good sort of central theme in theater, whether it's Shakespeare or Mahler, and everything in between. And he made meal out of that. He was also very innovative in his instrumental scoring. So listening to his symphonies is like listening to a whole new genre. And basically it boiled down to this. He tried to translate human emotion into sound, musical sound. He sought to translate his own Lebensangst, which is life, anxiety for life, which everybody has to a certain extent. He tried to translate that into music. In this, he had a certain kinship, of course, with fellow Viennese Sigmund Freud, because both of them, in different ways, were exploring the human emotional landscape. He pushed the Romantic period to its technical and expressive limits, thereby opening the door for the so-called modern music which was to follow. So he was crucial, absolutely crucial. They don't play a lot of Mahler here in Sarasota because it really is very demanding. The symphonies are quite long, and that's hard for the audience as well. But if you have an opportunity to hear Mahler symphonies, the second is called the Resurrection Symphony. It's very moving. Do take advantage of any opportunity to hear one live. But now back to Alma. Back to Alma. So in 1910, she was grieving the death of their daughter, Maria, to scarlet fever, and began an affair with the young German architect, Walter Gropius. Through an indiscretion by Gropius himself, he wrote a letter, and instead of addressing it to her, he addressed it to Gustav. Mahler read the letter and was devastated. And he sought the advice of Sigmund Freud. Freud at the time was in Brussels, so he traveled all the way to Belgium to find Sigmund Freud. Freud recommended that Mahler allow Alma to return to her own musical pursuits as an outlet for her grief. And that appeared to solve the problem. So now we're going to listen to a song that was composed by Alma Mahler. It's called In My Father's Garden. In My Father's Garden.
In meines Vaters Garten,
thanks. That's a recap of the original statements, and we're in shorter time, so sorry about that. Again, it's on the internet. So when Gustav died in 1911, Alma was 32 years old. She had a lifetime ahead of her, and she proceeded to live it, clearly aware of and enjoying her position as the widow of one of the most important romantic composers of the late period. She eventually married Walter Gropius and had a daughter, Manon, by him, named Mutzi. That's a cute name. She sadly died of polio at the age of 19. Mutzi was regarded by all those who knew her as an angel, very beautiful and sweet-tempered, and Alban Berg dedicated his violin concerto to her. Walter Gropius was drafted in 1914 and spent most of World War I on the front, which severely limited the time he could spend with his wife. While still married to Gropius, Alma became involved with the Czech-Austrian writer, author, poet Franz Werfel. Her marriage to Gropius lasted only 5 years, and then he magnanimously relinquished the field to Werfel. To her credit, Alma remained fiercely loyal to Franz Werfel for the rest of his life, although she did not marry him until 1929. Because Werfel was Jewish, the couple had to flee Austria after the Anschluss in 1938. It was on that trek from Austria through southern France and to Portugal to catch a ship to America that they visited Lourdes, and Werfel was inspired to write the Song of Bernadette, which made him famous in America. Has anybody read the Song of Bernadette? Read it or seen the film? I think there's a famous film. Yeah. Franz and Alma settled in Hollywood, joining a distinguished group of fellow exiles, among them the Schoenbergs, Heinrich and Thomas Mann, Bruno Walter, Otto Klemperer, Erich Wolfgang Korngold, Igor Stravinsky, Leon Feuchtwanger, Max Reinhardt, Franz Waxman, Bertolt Brecht, Fritz Lang, on. Many of these expats became American citizens. Schoenberg's as early as 1941. Even Thomas Mann became an American citizen in 1944. Igor Stravinsky, who knew? He was an American citizen in 1945. Franz Werfel died in 1945, and Alma moved to New York with her daughter Anna, who was a sculptress, and there she remained until her own death in 1964. Alma became an American citizen in 1946. So what is the legacy of Alma Mahler-Gropius-Werfel? Sadly, only one of her 4 children survived their youth. Although it is said that she composed over 100 songs, only 17 were ever published. Actually, you heard an orchestration of her song. She didn't do the orchestration, somebody else did. So her songs only existed in piano score. She wrote piano music, none of which has survived. We just can read about it. It is, I think, fair to say that her love, support, and advocacy enabled Gustav Mahler and Franz Werfel to achieve their own greatness. Franz Werfel said, "If I had not met Alma, I would have written a few more good poems and gone happily to the dogs." So part of her legacy has to be the music that she inspired. And our final excerpt, we're going to return to the Adagietto if you have a few more minutes, and play a bit more. And this recording is, I went through a lot of recordings to pick the one that I thought was the strongest. This is by a Korean orchestra. The conductor is Myung Won Chung. And it is, I think, just one of the best. The players are throwing their whole heart and body into it, and the tempo is really good. There is a conductor's score that was owned by the Dutch conductor Willem Mengelberg, who was a friend of the Mahlers, and it contains the following margin note. This adagietto, which is from the 5th Symphony of Mahler, is a declaration of love to Alma. And Mengelberg said, both of them told me this. So this excerpt is in fact 12 minutes long, but we're only going to play the first 5, and then if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Okay? Sorry?